In 2023, I watched over 70 movies, and that's not including reruns or rewatches. So in this video, I'm going to lightning round go through every single movie that I watched in 2023 and give you my quick thoughts. So let's get started. First up was the Oscar award-winning Ordinary People. I really liked the family drama in this and the emphasis on how therapy can help you work through different hardships in your life. Unfriended was really silly. I don't recommend it. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's basically about a bunch of teens that are on a video call and then all of them suddenly get murdered, but they stay on the video call, and it's supposed to be like a supernatural element to it. It was just kind of lame, honestly. No Country for Old Men was a very strange ending, but the acting was great. I just wish there was more of it, which I think is similar for this director's work. Trimble Frontier, I kind of watched just to try a different genre that I was used to and was not a fan. Babylon was probably the most underrated movie of this year. Please go watch it. The acting, the cinematography, it is incredible. Highly, highly recommend Babylon. The Babysitter was just sort of a fun, campy slasher, which, as you'll see later, was a big theme this year. Life of Brian, this is the first time I'd ever seen it, but I've seen The Holy Grail before. Not as funny as Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but that scene where he goes into space is just hilarious to me. Very, very fun. Neil Brenan's Blocks comedy special, such an interesting type of comedy special that I feel like is paving the way for how comedians do specials in the future. Very introspective, very deep. Same with his other comedy special on Netflix, Three Mics. Interesting concept, interesting premise, and it didn't ever get old to me, which I think is perfect writing. The Fundamentals of Caring. What is this one about? I seriously don't remember what this movie was about at all, which I guess should tell you everything you need to know. Knock at the Cabin, really wish it was better. I feel like it had such a potential and such a good premise, but it could have been better, but it just needed like another edit or two. It just wasn't the exciting thriller that I thought it was going to be. Fry was a really interesting story, and I hadn't really heard about the actual story of it before. The documentary's on Netflix. Go check it out. It's really interesting. We Have a Ghost. Again, I think it needed another draft. Everything felt very surface level. The villain was super predictable, and none of the characters really felt real enough to me. Then I watched all of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna give a hot take here. I like The Hobbit a little better. I just think the Lord of the Rings movies, especially the third one in the saga, was really boring. It just felt like a giant fight scene for 3 hours, and I felt like I was losing interest. At least The Hobbit was a little bit more upbeat and exciting. So, yeah. Then I watched Argo, which I did not expect to like as much as I did. I thought that Ben Affleck's performance was really good, and they did a great job of building up tension throughout the movie. Then I watched The Aviator. I cannot believe I have not watched this yet. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is just an amazing actor, and this movie was so interesting. It was almost 3 hours, but it never lost my interest. It was sort of like Catch Me If You Can, although I really like Catch Me If You Can a lot more. But I highly recommend giving this one out. Just the visuals, they're stunning. The story is like grips you. It's great. Then I watched The King with Timothée Chalamet and Robert Pattinson, and this just kind of felt like Game of Thrones wannabe. Robert Pattinson was like kind of this like arrogant Joffrey-like character, and I don't know. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I think it was good. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones and want something similar to watch, I recommend it. But I think I was just comparing it to Game of Thrones all the time, so it wasn't necessarily like the best. Then I watched All Quiet on the Western Front. I had not seen the original. I still haven't, but I watched the new version that came out on Netflix, and it was just really good. I typically find war movies like interesting, but not like gripping interesting. And this one I was very gripped with. It's all about the journey that this character goes on trying to deliver this message. And even though it's like moving from different set pieces, it all feels very like natural and it flows very well. And it was interesting knowing that Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be in the movie, but I kept expecting him and being like, when is he showing up? And it was like very much at the end. Then I watched the Pirates of the Caribbean series, another series this year that I have not yet watched, I know. And I cannot believe I sat on the series so long. Like, it is so much fun. The adventure aspect of it was just so much fun, and all of the actors put in 110% into their roles. Like, I was invested in the Will and Elizabeth storyline, and just Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow is like, it's just iconic. It's classic. I cannot believe I have not watched this series before. The fourth one is definitely a letdown, so I'm kind of glad that they're not making another one for now. Then I watched Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I feel like this was my year of like getting into movies that I have been putting off or have not been watching, but Blade Runner was definitely on my list for a very long time. And I will say that I think compared to Blade Runner 2049, 2049 was good and the visuals were stunning. I just think that they don't capture the imagination aspect as much as the original Blade Runner did. I think the original Blade Runner I would describe as dreamy. It's this you're kind of in this weird sci-fi world, but it's you're floating through it almost. And I feel like Blade Runner 2049 was more dark, which is weird to say, but I guess more realistic in the loneliness aspects, the themes that they hit on. But I think they're both really good and deserve a watch. Then I watched The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and I never heard of this movie. I was kind of just browsing on Netflix and found it. But it's interesting. It's a bunch of small short stories, some of which are much more whimsical, and others are really, really depressing. But I think each story is supposed to end very tragically. So yeah, it was very interesting. It was a collection of stories and stuff set in the West. So it was definitely a different movie. I was not expecting it. Then I watched Moonlight, finally. Again, another just stellar movie. There's so much attention to detail that was clearly placed in making this that I remember just pointing it out and I kept thinking about the movie hours after I'd watched it, of just oh my gosh, I really love the parallels between this section and all of this. But it's divided into 3 sections of this one character when he was a kid, a teen, and an adult. And it's just the visuals, the storytelling, it grips you. Even though it's 3 separate parts, you can kind of view it as 3 short stories, but it all fits together. It all feels so natural together, and you can see the progression of this character so naturally. It's great. And I watched Braveheart, a little too long, if I'm honest, but maybe that's just personal taste. Very much a bro guy kind of movie. So I get the the motivational aspects behind it. And there were parts that were really inspiring, I guess, but it kind of just, I don't know. It was and look at what this person did, and look at how cool he is, and look at all of this stuff. It was just kind of okay, I get it after a while. It was kind of repetitive a little bit. And I didn't really like the main girl, the female lead. She's okay. Then I watched The Wrong Missy, easily the worst movie I watched this year. I did not pick this movie. I was hanging out with people and they picked this movie, and it's 50-year-olds trying to write humor for young millennials, and I was just what is going on? None of the jokes landed with me at all. It was terrible. I don't recommend this movie. Then I watched Shiva Baby. I was originally going to watch Buttons, and then I didn't watch it, and so I was prepping to watch it with the director's debut short film, Shiva Baby. And I really think that this does a great job of not only showing Jewish culture, but also just with portraying anxiety. There have been so many family functions that I'm just I need to get out of here, and the uncomfortable, overwhelming sensations, and this movie just does that to a T. And the main character is not necessarily likable. She does some very questionable things before and during the movie, but I think that you sort of relate to her in just the pure human aspects of the fear and the anger and the confusion and the spiral that she kind of goes down in this movie. It's really interesting. Then I watched Conan the Barbarian because I had watched the Arnold documentary show, so I was interested, and I went back and watched Conan the Barbarian. And it was crazy to just know, like, from watching the documentary, that all the stunts, like, he had to do himself. And that on a technical aspect, this movie is fantastic. It's so interesting. And it has James Earl Jones in it, which I was not expecting at all. Some very strange scenes. Like, I don't know if it was necessarily for me. And again, the female lead was not my favorite, but I think overall, like, just the production quality on this movie was awesome. I watched Barbie. I was one of the people that participated in Barbieheimer this year. So my friend and I first saw Barbie in the morning and absolutely laughed our tails off. Like, it was so much fun. It was just such a fantastic comedy. I know it's so overhyped now, but just knowing how, like, doubtful everyone was before it came out, whether this was going to be good, just, and to know, like, that everybody's now obsessed with Barbie is, like, it's kind of good to know that I was, like, a supporter before, you know, it had come out. And then we watched Oppenheimer that same day, and what a tonal shift, but also what a just magnificent movie. There's been so much already said on the internet about Barbie and Oppenheimer, so I won't bore anybody, but man, I mean, the anxiety, you just feel the anxiety when you're watching that movie. Like, I was tense watching Oppenheimer, even though I couldn't relate to what the character was going through in terms of making an atomic bomb. You feel the weight of that, and just the end of the movie leaves you with just this, like, hopelessness, like, empty feeling that you kind of love, honestly. Like, I was like, I love that this movie made me feel so deeply this sense of, like, nihilism. It was wild. I watched The Banshees of Inisherin, an Oscar runner movie. Like, it was in the running for Best Picture last year for the Oscars for 2022. I finally got around to watching it. It was a lot weirder than I was expecting, and there were a lot of parts that, like, dragged on a lot, and some parts didn't buy the characters. Like, I think once there's a certain scene where one of the characters loses something he loves dearly, and I think that's when the movie starts to kick it into high gear, and I got really invested in it. But up until that point, I was kind of just like, and the purpose of this all is what, Like, I think it kind of flew over my head a little bit. I might need to rewatch to enjoy this more. Then I watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish because it was so hyped on YouTube. And yeah, this was a really, really great animated movie. So many interesting visuals, and just the way that it takes the franchise and movies and past, like, renditions of Puss and sort of changes it. It was really great. I like it. Then I watched the entire Scream franchise this year, and I will say that if I were to rank the Screams, I would say it'd be Scream 1, Scream 4, Scream 2, Scream 6, 3, and 5. That's my order. I think the newer ones, we kind of watched them out of order because I was trying to get my sisters into watching it, and they like Jenna Ortega. So we watched the Screams 5 and 6 first, and then went back to the original trilogy. But I will say that I think the newer ones are kind of going through, like, the Star Wars effect, where they're trying to, like, mirror the original trilogy. And I think it was a fun, entertaining watch for sure. And I'm definitely going to rewatch all of these for Halloween, like, no doubt. But I do think that the originals just seem a little more creative, and it just felt like watching the later ones that I came up with more creative ideas in trying to predict who Scream was, I feel like, in my opinion, than what actually ended up happening. But I get it, you gotta bait people, spurt expectations and all of that. Then I watched Whiplash. Fantastic movie. As somebody that went to music school for middle and high school, and, like, a serious arts program for classical music, I had such, like, horror flashbacks to some of these, not in the same, like, intensity and toxicity even that this character undergoes with his music teacher, but just certain scenes felt so, like, were so subtle but so real, and just made me go, like, oh my gosh, like, no. I just personally related to this movie, what can I say? So really glad I watched it. Gonna be a while till I rewatch it, though, just to get over some of those feelings that I had felt with it. Then I watched Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner in it. And I'm thinking now, like, about watching other Robin Hood movies to see which one I prefer. Because I feel like this one pretty much stuck to the, like, adventure, fantasy guy, like, Robin Hood story. I just think that the material itself can be taken in more interesting directions. But all of the movies I see with Robin Hood are kind of the same. But I have not seen the one that came out a few years ago, I think like 2012, or the one that Russell Crowe was in. I don't know if they're the same movie even. We'll see. Then I watched The Big Short, and while mostly all of the financial terminology and stuff went over my head, this movie does a fantastic job entertaining you and telling you all about the 2008 stock market crash and like how people predicted that it was going to happen, even though it seemed like crazy before that there was like this bubble and it was going to burst and everything. It is such a good movie. I highly recommend. I might put it as one of my top 10 of the year. It was great. Then I watched Nightmare on Elm Street because obviously that's such a hyped Halloween movie. And it was okay. Not really my favorite. I don't know, it was all a dream sequence thing. I get that that's been done to death now, so maybe at the time it was really interesting and because, you know, it all happens in a dream, but it didn't really scare me as much as I thought it was gonna scare me. Like, there's just a lot of more talking than there was, like, scary, which is fine. And again, like, different time periods, I think, call for different types of different things will fear you, and I think in the modern day we've gotten used to a lot of big spectacle and like faster paced slashers. I'm sure that this was great at the time. It just isn't my personal favorite. I watched The Samurai Part 1 and I enjoyed it. I have no reason that I haven't watched the other parts. Just I kind of watched it and forgot about it kind of thing. It was just like one of those casual weekends when I had no idea what to watch and I was just kind of putting it on to put something on. But it was good. The story was interesting and I would be interested in continuing watching the series. Then I watched Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. I'm so bad with names. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was a good movie. I think that it was funny. It served its purpose. It's not like one of those that you're going to remember, really. But it served its purpose of being just like a fun comedy movie to put on when you don't know what to watch. So I would watch it again. It's just kind of like casually funny. Then I watched The Last 5 Years. I love this stage musical so much. And finally, I think YouTube had it for a few months as like you can watch for free on there. And I definitely like the stage musical more. Trying to fit this story into a movie format just doesn't necessarily work, especially in the way that they did it. I feel like they didn't add anything extra to it. They just ran through all of the songs for the most part, and they had both of them in the same room, which the cool part about the stage musical is that there's only 2 songs that the characters are actually on stage together, and every other song you're meant to just see one character's perspective, and even if they're singing to their significant other, they're not on stage, which makes it really interesting. You can just feel that character's emotions. But the coolest thing about this story, in my opinion, is the fact that one, the order of the songs, you're seeing the man's perspective, Jamie, from the start of the relationship to the end, but also it's kind of like switches back and forth. You're seeing Kathy's perspective from the end of the relationship to the beginning of the relationship. So it's kind of alternating songs, and they're going on these like opposite timelines, and there's only like 2 points that they intersect at, which is just so beautiful. It's so interesting of a device for storytelling wise, and I just think the movie itself didn't necessarily live up to my expectations for the musical did. Then I watched Sausage Party. My dad wanted to watch this movie and it was wild. I would definitely watch it again. It is so funny and there's so many like jokes that some of them are really childish and lame, but then others are like just so witty, so funny. If you're looking for a strange movie, adult cartoon, you got a movie. Then I watched Choose Love, that like choose your own adventure, Laura Marano rom-com on Netflix. And I was doing this with my family, so they got to pick the ending just the way that we did it, and I was not satisfied with Jack or the rock star dude at all. I wanted the other guy. Why can't we just get a healthy option? I don't know. Then I watched the I Know What You Did Last Summer trilogy. to go along with our like slashers and stuff like that. It was definitely fun and campy and like interesting to see that this came out around the same time as Scream. And I don't know, there's just something really fun about it. Like, I think that it had a good amount of like whodunit mystery elements to it, but also a lot of like the drama with the core cast and everything, and a lot of action. It was a lot going on. So I enjoyed just the excitement of watching it for the first time and the wild ride of it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this series for sure. Then I watched The Wonderful Life of Henry Sugar and the 3 short films that Wes Anderson produced on Netflix as well. I just loved it. I love the like shorter films. I love Wes Anderson so much, so it was really good. It was really interesting to see what he does with Roald Dahl works, because they're so whimsical, and I think that the style is just perfect. The movies themselves and the short films are so short that I think it was just the perfect amount of time to house all of those story beats efficiently. I would say probably my least favorite of the short films was The Rat, or like and my favorite was probably Poison or The Swan. I liked The Swan a lot, but probably Poison is just the better one. And the Wonderful Life of Henry Sugar itself, I think, was the perfect pace. It was really interesting with all of these actors and everything. Like, I was grabbed. It grabbed me. I would definitely watch this again. Then I watched Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I had not really heard anything about this movie except that Pete Davidson was in it, and wow, what a subversion of expectations. This is an A24 production. I definitely loved how it kept you on your toes, like, of who's the killer? Who's the killer? It was so interesting what they chose to do at the end with it. Like, I just loved it. And I do feel like the writing was very Gen Z. Like, they knew how to write for Gen Z audiences, and it just felt very realistic and natural, which I really appreciate, because it's hard for Millennial and Gen X to do that. So having Gen Z writers, awesome. Then I watched Chain Reaction. This is a Keanu Reeves movie. It was good. It was a good like little like 90s action or early 2000s action flick. It was very of Keanu Reeves to do this movie, but not really much to say about it. Then I watched The Omen to go on our like classic Halloween movie thing that we were doing. Very interesting. I thought there would be like, I think that I was thinking that it was going to be a lot more like Chucky for some reason than from just what I've heard of it. But I think that it was like, I think it was mostly funny. Like, I don't think anything like really scared me. I think it was just like funny, but I still really enjoyed watching it. Then I watched The Exorcist, and not enough exorcism. I really thought the exorcism would be the majority part of this movie, and it wasn't, but it was cool. Like, production value, top notch. Like, I would be freaked out if I was that parent. Like, I mean, there's a reason it's classic. It's so good. Then I watched Killers of the Flower Moon, and geez, like, what a great movie. I mean, I walked away, I didn't really have many like afterthoughts of it, but I did walk away just being like, wow, what a great film. What a stellar film, as always. You know, like, Martin Scorsese is just like top-notch director. Then I watched Poltergeist, and this was a lot, again, definitely not what I was expecting. Like, I have all these ideas of what these classic Halloween movies are, and then I actually watched them and I was like, this is so weird. But apparently there's a lot of drama behind the scenes of like a lot of cast members like dying or like going wild. So it was interesting knowing that, watching the movie, but definitely give this a watch. This is a very good movie. Then I watched the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I think I like the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's more than the actual gameplay. The gameplay itself just kind of freaks me out. It's just, honestly, it's just this, you're just clicking buttons, like, you know, but knowing the lore and watching the lore behind it with the movie, I really like it. And I hope this franchise takes off and does a really good job. Then I watched Identity, which, again, I don't remember anything about this movie. Then I watched Across the Spider-Verse because it finally hit Netflix, and I was like, yes, let's go. And it was just as fantastic as I was assuming it would be. What is there to say that hasn't already been said about this movie? 10 out of 10 kind of movie. It's great. Like, highly recommend. Go watch this. Then I watched Nate Bernate's I'm so sorry. I watched this dude's comedy special after he had hosted an episode of Saturday Night Live, and it was good. It was very like kind of dry humor. Definitely like the type of comedian that I would think like my dad would like, kind of thing. And he wasn't bad. It just isn't like my favorite comedian, but highly recommend going to check out his special because it's really funny. Go do it. Then I watched Legally Blonde. I know, guys, how have I not watched Legally Blonde before? Well, the thing is that I've seen clips and I've also watched the musical. And so I figured I got the story, but I figured let me actually sit down and watch through the whole movie. And I mean, what is there to say? It's great. It's a great movie. Go watch it. Reese Witherspoon knocks it out of the park. Then I watched A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. And it was very interesting because I've only ever seen him in The Joker. And I know he's also in Brokeback Mountain, but I haven't seen that. But so seeing him just as this like goofy, kind of like heroic character was really a tonal shift. And I mean, there's a reason that he was so beloved, like, you know, as an actor, just because of his versatility. And after he died and everything, like, you know, he was given more acclaim. But there's a reason. Like, this movie was so much fun. And I think that all the characters were likable, and it was just like a feel-good movie. I really liked it. Then I watched the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, and yeah, this was good. I wish that they had made, I don't know if they did, but I hope that they made more of these movies, because while I do like the one with Sarah Michelle Gellar, like the show, I like this take of it. I just think it's fun, and just showing her like transition from like this like girly girl to like wanting more out of life and like being serious kind of thing was a cute story. Then I watched Empire Records, which, wow, people in the 90s were messed up, y'all. What were y'all doing? Like, this movie was so sad. Like, this definitely felt like the 90s version of The Breakfast Club. Then I watched American Made. Tom Cruise. Set in Louisiana. I think that they had a lot of interesting ideas with it. Is it a movie that I would necessarily rewatch again? No, but that's just personal taste. I would recommend you give it a shot, though. It's a good movie. Action-packed, interesting framing devices. I think it could have gone a step further with the concept, but that was fine. Then I watched Age of Adeline, and talk about taking science fiction to the next level. But I mean, Blake Lively is gorgeous, and she does a great job in this role. All of these people are like exceptionally attractive, though, which is kind of like, I mean, I get it, y'all gotta go together, but like, it was cute. And Harrison Ford being in it definitely helped, I think, with the connection aspect of it. I think it was just an adorable movie. Then I watched American Gangster, and whew, Denzel Washington, like, pulling his weight in gold. Like, this dude, I mean, it was great. It had me hooked the whole time. Like, it's definitely, I think I haven't heard of it as much as I have like other similar movies of this genre. So definitely check this out if you have not seen it. Like, it talks about a real story of like this guy that becomes this like New York gangster, and sort of nobody, you know, is really like knows about him or suspects him until Russell Crowe's detective character is assigned to track down this drug lord. It's really a good story. It's a really interesting story, so go check it out. Then I watched the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I just needed something to put on while I was doing something else, and it was good. Like, I can see why people really like it. I agree with what the online community's mostly been saying about it, that the story itself wasn't phenomenal, but that I think the references were really nice, the visuals were awesome, and the voice actors did a good job, except, in my opinion, Anya Taylor-Joy. I felt like her delivery was really bland for Peach sometimes, whereas, honestly, I thought Chris Pratt and Charlie Day did a really good job. And Jack Black, of course, too, but I was already expecting that. Then I watched Fargo, another Coen Brothers movie, and again, I just wish the ending had more. Like, I just wanted to live in this universe more. And like, I think I watched some video essays about it afterwards, talking about how like the characters were all like assigned with like animals, and like talking about like going back to your animalistic nature. But I just love like the spiral. I feel like the main like the villains of this movie, their character was more interesting to watch because you see like how everything just goes wrong, and it goes like this horrendous thing happens from this one stupid weird choice that this one character makes at the beginning of the movie, and it just all spirals, and I just wanted to live in it more. Then I watched Waitress the musical. I was so excited to see a pro shot of this with Sarah Bareilles as Jenna. Oh my gosh. Everything about me, I was just like so excited. I cried in the movie theater multiple times. I mean, I love this musical. The story itself is a little iffy in terms of morals, but the music is just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous musical. So I was so happy I got to see this, and I hope that they put more pro shots in theaters because I will pay for them. Then I watched Singles, which I've never heard of, but I loved watching this movie. I was kind of on like a 90s kick toward the end of the year, and I just think that it was so interesting, the framing device of like they sectioned it off, but it was 3 main stories, but they kept alternating back and forth. But just the way that like the characters like talk to the camera at some points, then don't, and just the story all of these people go through. It's about like people living in this apartment complex that are single and about their escapades with love, and it's such a interesting movie that I definitely want to rewatch. Then I watched Reality Bites with Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke, and let me just say, Ethan Hawke's character is toxic as heck. I just come off finishing up The Summer I Turned Pretty season 2, and everybody in my family was like, he's like if Conrad was like worse, if Conrad wasn't rich and was just like lonely and turned to drugs, that is Ethan Hawke's character. I don't understand. I just want, if you can comment down below, if anybody out there knows of a rom-drom where the main character has like a love triangle but chooses the healthy option, I would love to know about it, because even though Ben Stiller's character isn't like, I don't think that she was right for him either, I think that he was at least a better option than Ethan Hawke's character, just in terms of like living and just being not toxic, you know what I mean? So but I do think it was cute, and I like how it kind of had the like film documentary angle going on the side, showing like how reality isn't always what it appears and how like the media gets twisted and everything. It was interesting. Then I watched A Christmas Story 2, honestly by mistake. I thought that this was the new A Christmas Story with like the grown-up version of Ralph. And apparently they had made A Christmas Story 2 with like a teenage version, and it was just much goofier, and like I did not like it, which is probably why I'd never heard of it before. So I was trying to watch that one and didn't, and we just ran out of time this holiday season to actually watch the good one. So that sucks. Then I watched Love and Mercy. Definitely not the Beach Boys movie I was wanting to get, but the story that we got was fascinating. I had no idea any of this stuff with Brian Wilson had happened, but it's an insane story. I do think that it would have benefited with having Paul Dano play both the younger and older versions of Brian Wilson. Not that John Cusack wasn't good in the role, it's just that they don't look anything alike, and so it was really weird to see certain moments. I just wish that Paul Dano, because you can make him look younger or older with makeup, like just have him be Brian Wilson, and I think that it would have connected and flowed a lot better. And there were a couple things here and there that just didn't necessarily hit home with me that much. I wish that because they had Paul Giamatti playing this like evil doctor sort of character that's like abusing Brian, I wish that they would have played that up more. Like, honestly, I get that Elizabeth Banks' character, Melinda, is, like, important, obviously, to the real life, what happened to the story and the plot moving forward. I just wish that they would have built up a little bit more of that, like, that dangerous relationship with Brian and the doctor. I think that could have been a really interesting exploration, especially because, like, his own father was not very, kind to him. So, like, building into like how he viewed the doctor as like a father figure, a helpful figure, like it could have been really interesting, and it just wasn't. But I think a lot of my complaints just come from the fact that this wasn't the movie about the Beach Boys that I wanted to be made, but the one that we got was good. Then I closed out the year with watching 12 Angry Men, a movie that's been on my list for a very long time, and I cannot believe I haven't watched it before because, again, this has made it into my top 10 movies of the year. It's fantastic. I mean, it's listed in like everybody's list of top 10 movies like ever, and I definitely see why. Like, you would think that the pacing, even though it's slower than modern movies, would be boring, but it keeps you going. Like, it's so good. So that is it, y'all. That is my over 70 movies that I watched this year. Comment down below if you watched any of these movies, what you thought, and if you have any movie recommendations for next year, because I'm always looking to watch more movies. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.